You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. Today is also the feast day of St. Louis, King of France. Now, all week we have been talking about the eighth and final Beatitude. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We've already looked at the example of St. Rose of Lima's life, who willingly accepted all sorts of suffering out of love for Jesus. And yesterday we talked about the gift of the cross, how suffering really is a gift, and how the Christian life is a battle that is so worth fighting because the reward is heaven. Now, today, we are going to continue to examine a saint's life. Remember, I told you that no matter who the saint is, we can find evidence of suffering that they happily accepted out of love for Jesus. And that is true for St. Louis, King of France, as well. Now, this is a difficult one because he was a king. He was a very wealthy king. He wasn't born to a poor family and had suffering right away. Instead, he found ways to suffer out of love for Jesus. So St. Louis, King of France, lived during the Middle Ages, during the 1200s, and he actually became king when he was still a small child, when his father died. Eventually, he came of age and took control of the country, and he is remembered as one of the most beloved kings in French history. And this is for a number of reasons. The first one is that he totally reformed the criminal justice system in France. At the time, it was very corrupt. If you were poor, you were very quickly convicted. If you were rich, you were very often not convicted. But King Louis decided to overhaul everything, to put in other measures to ensure fairness. And he also was the first person to come up with the concept of innocent until proven guilty. This is something that we hear in our court system all the time, right? We assume that someone is innocent until there is enough evidence to prove that they are guilty. But this was a brand new concept that King Louis in France came up with. The other thing is that King Louis spent a lot of time with the poor. He brought together various institutions in France so that they could better serve the poor, but he also played a very personal role in serving the poor. He would oftentimes go out and distribute bread to the poor and suffering that lived around the castle, but also every night he would invite in poor people to share dinner with him. So instead of entertaining the most powerful and wealthy people in the land, he deliberately went out in search of those who were the poorest and the most suffering and invited them to eat at his table. King Louis was also very dedicated to his Catholic faith. He attended Mass every single morning and spent time in prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament. That's how he started his day always. He also was a faithfully married man and the devoted father of many. So that's a little bit about King Louis, but you might be wondering, well, I didn't really hear any examples of suffering. And it's true, but King Louis did embrace suffering. In fact, later in his reign, the Crusades were raging across the Holy Land. Now, the Crusades were a complicated, long war, but basically, Christian countries were going back to the Holy Land where Christ had lived and trying to reclaim these holy spots that had been taken over by Muslim groups. And of course, Muslims who did not believe in Christ were destroying them. They were also trying to protect the Christians that lived in this area. So King Louis, even though he was the king and he did not have to go and join the army, he formed an army and led them himself into the Holy Land. There he fought, he was captured, he became ill, he actually went back again, and that is where he died. He suffered and died, fighting the Crusades to protect the holy places where Christ had lived. So that is the biography of Saint Louis, King of France, a very good king, a very successful king, and also a very devoted man to Christ, whom we honor as a saint. And so as we think about his biography and are challenged to take on suffering for Christ, even maybe when we don't have to, let's recite this beatitude. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Thank you for being part of the Catholic Sprouts community as you prepare for the coming school year. We hope that some of our materials will be helpful, and I just encourage you to sign up to give us your email list so that you then have access to our entire library of resources. We have tons of free printable things, from resources from Mary to the saints to feast days. We really encourage you to check out the link in the notes for this podcast episode and go and explore and use what we have to make it a beautiful Catholic school year.
This show is a production of the Spoke Street Media Podcast Network. For more great podcasts, visit spokestreet.com.